right, so what is your full name?
David Allen Antis.
And why did your parents select this name for you?
Because my mother was married to my father.
There you go. Did you have a nickname?
Dave. I've been known by Dave most of my life.
Okay, nothing else?
Oh boy. Slim. I was a super skinny guy until I started gaining weight. But
Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Roseburg, Oregon, March 22nd, 1940.
And
At the Old Mercy Hospital.
There you go. How did your family come to live there?
My father had met and worked on my grandmother's ranch, and he had pursued her for some time. He was just a ranch hand, and she agreed to marry him, and they had married and was living, I think, in the Oakland, Oregon area when I was born, and that's like 10 miles from the Roseburg Hospital. That's where my mother was.
Were there other family members in the area?
My grandparents on my father's side lived in the Canyonville area.
Okay.
They moved there in 1937, 38, somewhere in there.
Okay. And what was the house that you grew up in? Was it an apartment, a farm? How many rooms, bathrooms? Did it have electricity, indoor plumbing, telephones?
I lived in various homes. My father had trouble working. He had a lot of trouble with alcohol and had trouble keeping a job. But lived in various homes. The home I lived in the longest was from the time I was in first grade, 1946, and I lived there basically most of the time until I graduated from high school in 1958. And it was an old, drafty, two-story home sitting right on the creek called Canyon Creek in Canyonville, Oregon, and which is 30 miles from Roseburg. And it wood heat, one little stove in the living room, so that the back rooms, bedrooms were never heated. Got pretty cold, a lot of thick blankets in the wintertime. But and then from that we lived in different homes. I lived in at least 2 different homes that didn't have indoor plumbing. One of them was just a shack, didn't have indoor plumbing, didn't have water, indoor water, had a well up behind the house. Didn't have electricity. We had kerosene lamp. And I think we lived there a year and a half till my dad lost his job. It was on a dairy he was working on. And lived in the nicest home I lived in all the time I was growing up. Was when I was in the second grade. We'd moved from the Canyonville area for a little while, lived in Myrtle Creek, into an almost new home, but it didn't have indoor plumbing. Had an outdoor toilet. Had to go to. A lot of people had outdoor toilets in their 40s.
Yeah, makes sense. Of any of those houses, was there anything special or any special items in them that you remember?
Not really. The house I remember the most is the one that I grew up in, basically in Canyonville, the old drafty house on the creek. And it was home, you know. It was, like I said, we didn't have regular finances, but my mother always made sure we was fed, and Dad, even though he didn't work much, he always grew a big garden. My mother would can for winter, and Dad fished and hunted and brought home game and fish, and so we usually ate pretty good. We had some tough times when there wasn't much to eat, and that was usually on one of my dad's big drunks. My mother never worked outside of the house. She was always home, and thank goodness, or us 5 children wouldn't have done very good.
Mm-hmm. What is your earliest childhood memory?
I'm guessing around 1944. We lived in a little house outside of a town called Riddle. And while I was living there, the 4th child in my family was born, and he died after about 4 days, and he was buried in a little graveyard on a little hillside where we lived. And it was just, I don't know why I remember that, but I can remember playing on that hillside. I don't remember hardly anything about the home. And the lizards and the snakes and the things I had fun playing with.
Right. Describe the personalities of your family members.
My parents and my siblings and
Yeah.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a hard man to know. He was an honest man. He felt he was honest. But he was very abusive to his family in many ways, but ways I won't get into unless you ask. He came back from World War II. He was in Army infantry. He was drafted in 1944 after we lived in Riddle, and he went through quick basic training and was sent overseas, and he was right behind the Battle of the Bulge, and basically landed at Normandy, walked all the way across France, Italy, and into Germany to the end of the war. And then 18, 19 months after he went in, he was home. The war was over. So he was a difficult man to know, but he tried in his way to do things. He was generous to other people, when he could. I used to have a lot of anger towards my father, but I've learned to let it go and try to look for his good points, and he had good points. My mother was an angel. She was always there for us. Quiet, rather timid woman in some ways, but she'd stick up for her children any and every time. But she was always there for us. She liked to read. She liked to study. She encouraged us to study. Dad encouraged us to study in school. We hadn't had an Antis graduate from high school in several generations, I don't think.
Wow.
And my dad I'm the oldest, and he was afraid I was going to not finish high school. He was really afraid of that, but I did. And my sisters finished high school. And my brother's 7 years younger than me. Finished college and has been an engineer for many years back on the East Coast. My siblings, my sister Susan Rhoda Antis was born on March the 16th, 1941. And my sister Mary Linda Antis was born March 14th, 1942. My brother Jeremy was born in last 43 or 44, and I have very little information. I remember that he was buried on a hillside, and there was a little cross there we could go see. He was like 5 days old when he died, and I was like 3.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's an actual early remembering, but. And then my brother Philip J. Antis, was born in 1947 on March 8th. He was a real interesting fellow. My sisters were both good people. Susan was a stubborn, hot-tempered person. A year younger than me. We fought more like two brothers than a brother and a sister. And my sister Linda, 2 years younger than me, was quiet and timid and shy in some ways. And both my sister Susan and I were her protectors in school or wherever we needed to be. And my brother Phil was quiet, not quiet really, but a hardworking young man, had a paper route, had done things to keep going, was very sharp in math, and finished high school in he finished in 1965 in Myrtle Creek, Oregon. He went right into the Marine Corps because this was when the Vietnam War was pretty hot, and still had 8 or 10 years to go with it. But he was shipped right over to Vietnam, and he was because of his math background and everything, he was in a long range gunnery
strikes.
where they make those, and so he didn't actually do rifle front line fighting that way, but they threw a lot of heavy strikes towards the enemy and had a lot of heavy strikes hit them. That's
Sure.
pretty close. But,
Great.
and then my brother Michael was born in 1952, and he was born premature, weighed 3 pounds, which you understand, you were their son. And he was in Dornbecker Hospital in Portland for at least 3 months, maybe 4. And my mother would take me as the oldest with her on a Greyhound bus, and we would go up to see him once every 2-3 weeks, whatever we could afford, which wasn't much. But we didn't know until he was in school. His first grade teacher sent a note home and saying we should have his eyes checked. And she said the reason why is because he couldn't see what was on the blackboard. He just couldn't see it. And we had no idea. But they had his eyes checked, and he was really poor eyesight. And he wore thick glasses. In those days, they didn't have what they have now.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike grew up kind of sad, kind of depressed, kind of sneaky about things, got in trouble for stealing and stuff like that. And then he got into drugs and stuff, and he died when he was 43. And cirrhosis of the liver. And that's my family.
There you go. And what kinds of games did you guys play growing up?
A lot of board games and card games. My dad loved games. He loved jigsaw puzzles. We'd play canasta with him. We'd play Monopoly. We'd play. To be honest, I got to where I hated board games. Still
do.
Still don't like it very well. And but he did like to play games. And my sisters liked it, I think, pretty much. I think my brother Phil liked it some. I played, but I had a hard time doing it.
Okay. What was your favorite toy and why?
My favorite toy. I don't remember a favorite toy. I always wanted a BB gun, rifle. I want a Red Ryder BB gun.
There you go.
And I never got one. One time we was out having a war with kids that did have BB guns, and I got shot with one, and it went into my shoulder. It penetrated one end. My mother dug it out, I think. And I don't know where I was throwing rocks at him or what, but I don't remember a favorite toy. I really don't. I've been told, my mother told people when, after I'd grown, that I had a doll when I was little. I always denied it, but I don't remember it either. I don't know. I like trucks and cars, Tonka thing type things. We didn't have the big ones. Because we were on assistance, federal assistance, welfare, usually there wasn't much money for gifts, but normally at Christmas we'd get a box of food for Christmas dinner, and we'd get some presents for the kids and stuff, even sometimes some clothes. But I really don't have a big recollection of favorite toys.
All right. What was your favorite thing to do for fun?
Growing up,
Yeah, movies or beach or
I loved marbles.
marbles?
I loved to play marbles. Wasn't very good at it. I don't think I've ever been good at any athletic type thing, or if you can call marbles athletic. We played cat's eye marbles and we played Roundsy marbles, and I loved to play for keeps. Suppose that was a form of gambling, I don't know. But I usually lost my marbles. Didn't do that well. Some kids were pretty good, but I always tried.
There you go. Did you have family chores? What were they, and which was your least favorite?
My least favorite probably was because most of the years growing up I lived in that drafty old 2-story house on the creek with one little wood stove. Dad would always make sure we had wood. I had to split it.
Okay.
By the time I was pretty young. And I had to carry it in. And I had to make sure that it was wood boxed by the heater inside the house. The stove, pot bellied stove was full. And we got married, I told your grandmother, I don't want a wood stove. I don't even want a fireplace. I don't want to have wood. I'm young, I'm only 76, but we still hadn't burned any wood.
There you go.
I've been married.
Only camping trips.
Only on camping trips.
Any other family chores, or was that your primary one?
That was my primary. My sisters worked with my mother, and because we're just 3 years between us, you know, one year each between us. And I done whatever work needed. Yard work too, if it was needed. I started doing yard work for money when I was about 11.
Okay.
And a woman who was a justice of the peace there in Canyonville hired me and taught me a lot of things, trimming roses and in season and mowing her lawns and doing things. And I'd done that till I was, 17, 16, 17. And until I graduated to other type of work where I made more money.
Okay. So along those lines, did you receive an allowance or?
Never had an allowance.
Okay. But when you started making money, were you a saver or a spender?
Tried to save, but if my dad happened to be on one of his drunks, he would steal it from me.
That's nice.
And I didn't think it was nice.
Yeah.
And then even when he was sober, we'd be so low and think we didn't have groceries or couldn't pay the lights or something, I would help with that with money. But I earned money from the time I was, like I said, about 11.
Okay. Awesome. What was school like for you as a child?
I liked school. I always liked it. I was always got along great with the guys. I was always shy around the girls. I always liked the prettiest girl in class. And somehow or another, she never thought the same about me.
That you're the prettiest girl?
That I was the prettiest boy. But it paid off for me because then I met your grandmother.
There you go.
A year out of high school, and she was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen, and still is.
There you go.
So it worked out good for me.
What were your best and worst subjects, and did you do anything beyond high school?
Best and worst subjects. Best was I liked. I've never done much in the high math things because we didn't have it in our little high school. They would offer algebra one year and geometry the next. And the way it hit me, I had to take geometry first and then take algebra. It was all right. I got through it fine. I really loved anything to do with history. Always loved history classes. I loved anything to do with reading. English I liked, but loved the reading part. Didn't care much for the
punctuation and grammar.
The grammar part. No, I always had trouble with that. But I liked school. I enjoyed school. And what was the other question?
It was, did you attend anything beyond high school?
Your grandmother and I, all starting about 4 years after we was married, we started taking a few classes. And then when we got into our jobs, when they advanced me into administrative job, I took classes. I went with my job. Your grandmother done the same thing with her job. But we never got any degrees. We could have challenged a number of times for a 2-year degree, I'm sure. But we didn't.
And what school activities and sports did you participate in?
Oh goodness, I loved basketball. I loved it with a passion. Pretty good shot, pretty much anywhere on the court. But I was so clumsy with that basketball. I could not make a lay-in. My size 12 feet and my 140-pound, 6'2" frame, 6'3" at one time, I just was clumsy. I played hard in high school. Then my freshman and sophomore year. In my junior year, the coach said, well, Dave, we're going to have to put you on the JV team again this year in a little high school, And I said, that's enough. I quit. Went out for football. Didn't like it. And I was told the coach catch you smoking, he'd kick you off the team. So I made sure the coach saw me smoking. Got kicked off the team. Baseball, never was. We ended up a softball game or whatever. You go out and pick sides. It was like, okay, I guess we'll take Andis. Andis left. Never was good.
I don't know what's changed over the
That's
two
true.
generations.
Is that right?
Seems pretty realistic.
Sorry about
For some
that.
weird reason, I can believe you. Do you remember any fads from your youth? Popular hairstyles, clothes?
When Elvis Presley came on the scene in 1955, I think, if I remember right, 54 or 5, I was pretty impressed. We didn't have television at home, but worked on a ranch one summer, 55, when they did have a TV. And I thought Elvis looked pretty sharp. And so I started combing my hair back into what was called a ducktail at the time. And with wild root cream oil. Kind of greasy. My dad hated it. I'd be standing there trying to print in front of a mirror, kitchen mirror, before I go to school, so it looked just perfect, you know. He'd, you look so bad, he's a big sissy, you know. And he was, but and clothes, you know, we had a lot of hand-me-downs. We had things. As I earned money, I was able to buy my own clothes. Till I was about 15 or so, my mother would help me usually with it. And we bought our clothes at either Montgomery Ward's or Penny's, as I remember. And fads, I don't know. Not much. You know, I liked English brogue shoes, polished. Haven't had a pair in 50 years. But I liked them then in high school. They was fairly popular. But nothing really stuck to me, you know.
Okay. Who were your childhood heroes?
Childhood heroes.
Or hero?
Huh?
Or hero?
Or hero. Childhood hero. Well, you got me stumped on that one. Sorry.
You don't have one. You don't have one. That's okay.
Well, I'm sure I did. I'm just trying to remember who it might have been. I love comic books. I read all the Superman, you know, Batman, all the comic books. I loved them. My grandmother Mary, my mother's mother, for probably 4 or 5 years, when I'm ages between maybe 8 and 13, she would subscribe to a comic book for each of my 2 sisters and myself. And mine would always be Roy Rogers comic book. I thought he was pretty sharp. In fact, I liked Red Ryder. I liked some of them. Lone Ranger. You know. Who was that masked man? You know, I liked those things. We would listen to. We didn't have TV, but we had a radio usually, and we'd listen to the stories on the radio. And I loved them. But as far as any particular hero, I don't know.
Not really. What were your favorite songs and music?
Well, whether it was pop, usually once I got into high school, you know, I liked Elvis. I liked some of the Western. I loved Johnny Cash from the time he first started. I loved Perry Como, Marty. Can't say his last name right now. Country Western pop, I guess, what I like mainly.
Okay. And did you have any pets?
Yeah. The earliest I can remember, we had a collie dog. When my dad was on that dairy, I loved her. She's a beautiful dog. And the neighbor raised sheep, and he shot and killed my collie. He said he was chasing sheep.
Jeez.
And he didn't like my dad, and I think that's why I done it, because we always swore him down. This gentle collie wasn't killing sheep, you know. And I had various dogs. I remember growing up. Once in a while we'd have a cat around. I had a cat, a tomcat, that I liked particularly well, and that was in high school. And he'd sleep with me in my bed back by the creek, you know. And one morning I got up and he laid a big crap right in the middle of the bed. Never had another cat in my house.
Okay. And what was your religion growing up? And if if you had a religion, what church did you attend?
Never had a particular religion. My dad was kind of anti-church. He was Christian. He was raised Southern Baptist, forced to go to church and hated going, resented it. And my mother, I'm not sure, but about the church, my two sisters-in-law especially, that I grew up with, once in a while, Dad would decide to go to a church. I remember we went to an Episcopalian church when my dad spent a year in Klamath Falls going to school right after the war in 1946, I think. And we went and they passed around the little wafers that he took, for sacrament. And my sister Susan, a year younger than me, was hungry, I guess. And she took a handful of them. And she got a really hard spanking when we got home. I remember that. But it wasn't, we go to once in a while to a Southern Baptist, went to a Christian church, done some of the summer programs that kids do where they go paint pottery or make some little thing and learn Bible stories. And my mother taught me to read before I started school. And she had this set of books, and one of them was Bible stories. We called them the Red Books. And she'd read those to me. And so I always grew up with it, but never was active in the church until I was 36 years old and became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
There you go. And were you ever mentioned in a newspaper?
I'm not going to tell you about that.
What? What did you do?
I was 18 years old. It was New Year's Eve. I was working at a gas station, closed it up, and I was drinking. I'd been drinking for a year or two, and I was drinking some kind of whiskey or vodka or something. Had another bottle, got off work, and my friend come and picked me up. We was going to go to a dance at a place called Lindy's. And I said, well, you better drive because I'm not doing too good. And he didn't drink. And so we drove up 30 miles to Roseburg to Lindy's barn, it was called. And we're almost there, and I told Cecil, my friend, to pull over. I'm sick. He pulled over, and I jumped out of the car, and I started heaving. And just heaving and heaving and heaving, and the state policeman pulled up. And he let Cecil take my car, because Cecil wasn't drinking. And he put me in the county jail. Spent the night there. We got to the jail, and they was booking me, and I looked around, I had to puke again. I saw a potted plant, big old potted plant in the corner. So I went over there and puked all over it. I don't think it done me any good. And I was laid in jail all that night with an old stinky drunk. And he stunk so bad, and I was sick all night long, dry heaving. I remember they come in a tin cup of coffee for me in the morning, and I drank coffee in those days. And, this was awful. And then the worst part was, about noon, here come my dad and mother to come to get me out of jail. And my poor mother, we was walking out, and she said, I hope this don't get in the newspapers. She had relation all over, and it was. And then the News Review the next day.
Wow.
Drunk on a public highway, $40 fine. And that's my...
There you go. That's not horrible, but not great.
Boy, it was to me.
Yeah, at the time. Who were your friends when you were growing up?
Growing up, a man named Charlie Black. That's what we named our son, youngest son.
Oh, okay.
He was my friend from probably fifth grade on up through high school. He actually moved away from there about the 10th grade of high school, about my sophomore year, but I'd still go see him. He only lived 70, 80 miles from us, and spend a night with him or whatever. We spent nights back and forth through Roanoke. And like I was friends with most of the guys. It was the girls I was shy on being close friends with, because I was always looking for the real pretty one to smile at me, but she wouldn't do it. A guy named Jerry Carson, he and I went through high school together. He moved down there from Portland, Oregon when I was starting my freshman year. And a real smart-aleck guy from the big city, come to that little town, going to straighten all of us out. We didn't like each other.
What world events had the most impact on you while you were growing up, and did any of them affect you or your family personally?
World War II affected our family. My dad would have been a better man, I think, if he hadn't went through those bad experiences he had in World War II. It was the end of the war, and it was just, he was a foot soldier going across with a platoon shooting and being shot at, you know, snipers. The only time Dad would ever talk about it is if he was real drunk and he'd tell some blood-curdling stories, which I'm sure was true. Mm-hmm. He'd wake up in the middle of the night screaming sometimes, and you'd go in there and he'd just be laying in a pool of sweat. Bed would be actually wet from top to bottom. And if he made a noise like sounded like a bomb coming through the air or something, he'd hit the ground. Even when he was 50 years old, he'd do that. I think that's probably had the biggest influence on our family than anything. You know, Dad would have done better, not had the alcohol problem, I think, if it hadn't been for World War II.
Describe a typical family dinner. Did you eat all together as a family, and who did the cooking, and what were your favorite foods?
My mother done all the cooking. She made, from what she had, my mother could take a pound of hamburger and make what she called porcupine balls with rice in it, or meatloaf or something, and make it stretch to feed all 7 of us in the family. And she really could. She was a good cook. I loved she'd make pudding, cornstarch pudding, vanilla pudding, sometimes chocolate pudding, just all from scratch. You know, I loved that. She'd make a cake or something. You know. The typical meal was probably, if we had any meat, maybe been game that was in the freezer or something, or fish that Dad had caught. But then we ate a lot of beans. Fried potatoes was a real hot one in our family. Always had a lot of fried potatoes. Always required to eat everything on your plate. Put it on the plate, you had to eat it all. Never bothered me much. The only thing I ever had trouble eating when I was a kid was what they call hominy. Hominy grits is corn, what they soak and lye and other things, and it gets real, the kernel of corn will be about 3 times the size of it. And it just, to me, it had this awful flavor. I just couldn't hardly swallow it. Which, it doesn't taste bad at all now with a little butter on it, that's pretty typical. But we always, even though we were poor, we always had food. The really, really tough times, we didn't have food. I remember a few times my mother just absolutely didn't have anything to cook for us, nothing in the freezer. And she would take cornmeal and boil it up like cornmeal mush. And she'd put it in a loaf pan, let it get cold, and she'd slice it, and she'd fry it in lard and pig fat. Tasted pretty good. Didn't mind it.
And gave you some nutrition and filled you up a little bit. How were the holidays, including birthdays, so like birthdays, Christmas, celebrated in your family? And did your family have any special traditions?
Yeah, holidays were always celebrated. Birthdays for what they could. Same with Christmas, you know, Thanksgiving. No special traditions, huh? Well, if you had gifts, you'd always open in the morning, never the night before. There was some thought of Santa, I think, till I was 8 or 9. And then with my younger siblings, further. Special family traditions. I just, Christmas Eve would usually read from Luke, Christ's birth. And Dad would, if he was sober, and he usually was for holidays, he'd make sure he was sober for those times. But that's about it, I guess.
Okay. How is the world today different from or what it was like when you were a child?
It's much more complicated, much more. Didn't have the electronics you have now. You know, it was. When I grew up, mainly it was a radio. We never had a television in our home. We never had a phone in our home until I left home. It's just, you know, in many ways it's the same old world. We just keep going through crises all the time. The worldwide, countrywide. The things that are happening from the world wars to the countries where people are starving to death, even in our own country. You know, there was a lot of people that had it a whole lot worse than I did. You know? But we had a dad that tried to provide for her family, and the mother that was always there for her family. So it was a good place to grow up in many ways.
Who was the oldest relative you remember as a child, and what do you remember about them?
Oldest was my great-grandmother, Cordelia. My mother's grandmother.
Uh-huh.
She died when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And this is really stretching my memory. I think 3. And I remember going to her home. I don't remember her because she was at the mortuary or wherever, you know, she was dead. But there was some other kids, my sibling, my 2 sisters and myself, and some other kids from family there that somebody was there taking care of. And when they had her funeral. And then it was scary, you know, and then this kind of proper, nice home with the overstuffed furniture that was much nicer than what we had at home, and that's my earliest, yeah.
Okay. And what do you know about your family's surname?
It originated in Germany as von Blum. The von Blums were asked to leave the country because of the religion. They had started a religion from the Catholic Church called the Moravian Church, and they went to France and then to the United States. And while in France, they changed their name to Antis, which is the Greek name for flower, as von Blum is the name for flower in German. That's basically what we know.
Okay. Is there a naming tradition in your family, such as always giving the firstborn son the name of his paternal grandfather?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of. I've never noticed that there is.
Okay. What stories have come down to you about your parents, your grandparents, more distant ancestors?
Parents and grandparents basically is, other than World War II, been the Great Depression. It started in 1929. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty tough times. My dad grew up on a dirt farm in Oklahoma. Left home when he was 14. Rode the hobo train, the freight trains with hobos, stayed in hobo jungles, and ended up in Northern California and worked on fishing boats, worked on ranches. And he was like 22 or 23 when he met my mother. So, and he'd actually, before he met my mother, he went back to Oklahoma and helped his parents move to Oregon because they'd lost their family farm and whatever. My grandfather, he died when I was grown. He was in his mid-80s, Grandpa Ezra Allen Antis. When he was a young man, he was from Kentucky, and he had a movie theater. This was in like 1910, and it was silent movies, and he just had a tent. He'd go from town to town, set up his tent, and show it, and somebody play a piano or whatever, and he'd show his movies. And that's how he met my grandmother in Oklahoma. He went to her hometown and they'd met. And they had each just broken up from an engagement or whatever, and they married each other. And as far as I ever knew in their lives, I knew them and up into my adult years, they always hated each other. I thought they was always mean to each other. But I always felt sorry for my grandpa, but my mother told me later that my grandpa was awful mean to my grandmother, but until he got so sick he couldn't be mean anymore. But even as a sick man, he had a massive stroke and one side was kind of numb. He sat in an armchair for, 8 or 9 years. Wow. And he died after your dad was born in 1963. And he basically, the most interesting I remember about him is we'd sit with him and he'd kind of grunt and talk to us a little bit, but he couldn't talk very much. But he had always chewed tobacco, and he chewed plug tobacco. So we'd go over there and cut up his tobacco. My grandmother asked us to do it in little squares, and then he'd open his mouth and you'd put it in there. And the inside of his mouth was just tobacco colored. His teeth, his tongue, his everything. And it always fascinated me to look inside his mouth when he opened it up. That was his only luxury, I guess, was chewing that plug tobacco.
Wow. Anything else that comes to mind? And it kind of plays along into the next question, which would be, are there any stories about famous or infamous relatives in your family?
Oh goodness, there's a story I run across doing genealogy, and I can't tell you who it is now, but it was somebody on my dad's side that was in a jail, and I think it was like Missouri, and a lynch mob come down and took him out of jail and hung him.
Whoa.
Never knew what it was for. Don't know what he done. So that's kind of infamous.
Yeah.
He was probably sorry he'd done it. Whatever.
Yeah.
He got caught or whatever.
Have any recipes been passed down to you from family members?
Recipes, gosh. You know, they maybe not to me, but to your grandmother, they have. We have some still old recipes and stuff. And in fact, some of the ones that your grandmother uses, she got from her mother, and some of them she got from my mother, because she was close to both of them.
Right.
Very nice.
Are there any physical characteristics that run in your family?
Men are all ugly. No, I don't know. Antis men are usually fairly tall. I don't suppose I know of anybody in the last few generations that was under 5'10" or so, and some over 6 foot. And some of them, like you, just try to get up to 6 foot.
That fell half an inch short. At least I'm not Jared.
Yeah.
Jared's 2 or 3 inches shy right now.
Yeah, and I keep telling him, I said, Jared, you're going to be the tallest in your family. You just hang in there. You're going to do it. I think he's about to give up.
He might need to here pretty soon. Are there any special heirlooms, photos, Bibles, or other memorabilia that have been passed down in your family?
There was a family Bible that was burned in our attic in a fire we had when you were, I forget how old you
I've
and your
been maybe 7 or
you and your mom, and you were somewhere between 7 and 10 probably. You come from Texas to spend a few days with us there, and then the day you left, the attic caught on fire. Hot August night. It had been in several generations. It was an old Bible. It had a lot of information in it.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't know of any particular thing. We have that old book that it was handed down from my great grandfather to my grandmother to my mother and then to me about little Charlie's namesake, Grandpa Townsend. And he had been given a book when he graduated from college in Young Harris, Georgia. And then he died 3 years later after he had 2 children, my grandmother and my great uncle. And that book was passed down. It was a book that was given to him about business secrets, things to work with. And then we had it rebound and gave it to your Uncle Charles. And
yeah, I got a copy of that. Actually.
He uses it in his business, your business right now.
Mm-hmm. I have a separate print version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that he bought. Let's see. What is the full name of your spouse? What about? Well, we already went through siblings and parents. So what is the full name of your spouse?
Carol Sue Huffman.
And when and how did you meet your spouse?
We met in Caneyville, Oregon, on August 8th or 9th of 1959. I was managing a service station there that also serviced log trucks. The owner of the station was a log truck owner, or a logging company owner. And I was in the back changing truck tires, and hot. And all I had on, I had all my clothes off with my undershorts, and then I had coveralls on. And it was 3 times too big for me, big baggy things, and I had unbuttoned halfway. And they came back and got me and said, John Cheney wants to see you up front. Now, John Cheney was an old drunk around town. I wasn't too crazy about it. Well, I went out there, and he's sitting there with these two young girls, and he's pickup, and he said, "I want you to introduce you to this girl sitting in the middle." And it was your grandmother, Carol Sue. And he embarrassed us both so bad, saying, he said, "Now she's a good-looking woman, and she works hard, and she saves her money." And then she was telling your grandmother that he works hard, he works at this station, does a lot of good things. And we were so embarrassed we couldn't even look at each other. And then 2 or 3 days later, she was walking by the station, and I saw her, and I had worked up my courage, went out and asked her if I could give her a lift or something, and asked somebody to take my place till I was gone. And she let me, and I asked for a date, and she said yes. And then that Saturday night, when I went to pick her up, she's come out on the front door. She's like, "Can't go. I'm sorry." And I figured she just got a good look at me and decided that she didn't want me, and really about it. I said, "Well, why? You know, again." I said, "My father won't let me." I said, "Let me talk to him." Let me talk to him. I was pretty cocky. I'm 19 years old and tough. And she said, "No, you don't want to talk to him. You best just to leave." And I said, "No, I can talk to him. I can talk him out of it." And then I heard this big booming voice come out of the house, and it said, "Hey, boy, that your car out there in my driveway?" And I said, "Yes, it is." He said, "Why don't you get in that so-and-so and get the so-and-so out of here right now?" I was gone. I was burning rubber getting out of that driveway. And then finally, gosh, it must have been a month after that, she turned 18. She was 18 already. And she told her dad, "So I've got a job." And she had a job at Myrtle Creek, 10 miles away. And she said, "You let me go out with him, or I'm going to go stay in an apartment." They offered me an apartment over at the hospital. And he said she could. So she went out with me on the first date. Second or third date, we're never quite sure about it now. We was driving home from a date. And I said, "You know, I've never really thought about marriage until now." And she started planning marriage. All in the same, I hadn't even got shut my mouth again. And I thought, what did I just say? What is wrong with me? You can't afford to be married. You don't make enough money. You're crazy, you know. But I wasn't. It was a real awkward proposal, and I denied it was a proposal for years. But it was. 56 years later, here we are.
There you are.
Happy as can be.
What did you do on dates?
Drive-in movies, out to dinner, out to we'd go between Roseburg, 30 miles north of us, and Grants Pass, 50 miles south of us, doing different things, you know. And there was a few like outdoor celebrations we went to. 9 months after we met, we were married.
And where and when did you get married?
We got married in Caneyville, Oregon on May 27th, 1960. And we were married in a Methodist church. We'd been told by people that this little Methodist minister was good. He'd really done a good job, and he was really well. So we went and talked to him, and he come in, had this interview 2 times. He had to come in 2 times to interview with him. He said, "I always talk to my couples twice." And his name was Cyril Dorset, and he was a little Englishman with a strong English accent, and he was really, really nice to us, but real frank with us, and told us that we needed to make each other the most important, you know, go to bed at night mad at each other, and things that we've tried to live by since we talked. I respected him a lot.
That's awesome. And what memory stands out the most from your wedding day?
Her father walking her up to the altar in the church, said, "Drunk, he could hardly walk." It was. And then he got her up there, and I was so nervous. I was pretty calm up then. Your mom was nervous up till then, but then she just calm as could be. And I put the ring on her finger after the wedding, and she put the ring on my finger, and she couldn't get it over the knuckle. And I started going like this, and then people started laughing out in the audience. It was kind of embarrassing. And then we went out and got in their car and left, and they had tied cans to it and had painted it all, just married all over it. And they had also filled my muffler with axle grease. The guy I worked with had borrowed it about noon that day and took it down to another station and put it up on the rack, drilled a hole in it and put an grease insert in it, and they waited till that night in the wedding, and one of them crawled underneath the car and just filled it full of axle grease. We got in there leaving town. Time we got to Canyonville, it was just a haze of smoke behind us, and you couldn't. They had to stop following us with that because you couldn't see. Burned that muffler out completely. I mean, you talk about pipes. I had pipes.
That's funny. And how would you describe your spouse, and what do you admire most about them? Her.
I'll start crying talking about this. Your grandmother is one of those people who is noticeable right to start with because she's beautiful, but she's beautiful inside and out. It's the best thing that ever could have happened to me in this life was the day I met your grandmother. She don't know it. She don't know how wonderful she is. She really don't. But she's just, she's a person that loves those around her, stands up for people. She's led us in this marriage in many ways. I never would be involved in church if it wasn't for her. I'm sure I would, because I was raised to be a non-churchgoer, you know. That's the way my dad raised us. I'm so thankful for our beliefs in this church that we know that we can be together after this life. And when we were married in that Methodist church, May 27, 1960, he said, "Until death do you part." Well, after I joined the church in 1976, a year after, you have to wait a year after you're baptized, and as you know, on May 31st, 1977, we were sealed in the Manti Temple. And when we were sealed, he said, "For all of time and eternity." And that's what we believe, both of us. And we want to be together and want to be with our family.
Awesome. And what do you believe is the key to a successful marriage?
Patience. Being able to go 80-20 both ways.
Mm.
You know, we've had our squabbles, but we've always been close. We've had times when that things could have been a lot better, but we've never been inclined to give up on each other at all. And if someone had given up on somebody, it would have been your grandmother giving up on me, because I was pretty stubborn with my word of wisdom problems and allergy to church-going activities. It strained us some, but just to be there for each other. And all of a sudden, it's 56 years after we're married, and we're closer than we've ever been.
Mm-hmm. How did you find out you were going to be a parent for the first time?
Well, your grandmother was real disappointed in our marriage, and a couple months after we married, she still wasn't pregnant. And so we went and talked to the doctor, and the doctor gave her a little advice, and a month later she's pregnant. So 11 months after we was married, your father was born, and we were both real happy, and we was excited. I was working in a mill and working evenings, and we had regular doctor's appointments 30 miles away. We went with the doctor for just a checkup. I sat in the car when your mother went in so I could smoke and whatever. Your grandmother came back out, and I said, "Well, how are you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm fine, feeling good." And she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm in labor." we were in Roseburg where the hospital was, but she didn't have her. I said, okay, we'll go to the hospital right now. She said, no, I've got to go home first. I'm just starting. Don't worry about it. So I very reluctantly took her back to Canyonville, and we gathered her stuff and then drove back to Roseburg, and then after 8 hours labor, she delivered a fine, healthy son.
Like a weird head.
With a long, pointy head. But the next morning, he looked beautiful. Head shaped, on end shape.
Why did you choose your children's names?
Your grandmother insisted that your dad be named after me. We both regretted it sometimes since then, but I think it's the best thing to do. But that was her insistence, and I gave in to it. And the second one, we kind of tried that. She said, well, you got to name this. So with Charles, we tried to think of, well, my two good friends growing up was Charles Black and Jerry Carson. So we ended up with Charles Gerald Antis.
There you go. And what was your proudest moment as a parent?
Proudest moment as a parent? When our sons left on their missions and for a time served at the same time. Because when your dad had been out for about a year, your uncle came out. 2 different parts of the world, one in Germany, one in Thailand, and that was proud. We were very proud of that.
What did your family enjoy doing together?
We enjoyed traveling. We enjoyed going places. Your grandmother and I've always enjoyed traveling. We enjoyed going to movies, going out to eat, to buffets and stuff like that. There used to be a buffet restaurant in Roseburg that they loved, and your dad and uncle were experts at going there and skipping the salads and loading up on the shrimp and all the goodies, and they could eat a lot. They loved it. Then we had a favorite Chinese place we go to where they had really good breaded shrimp. And boy, those boys counted those shrimp to make sure that they got their equal share. They was very careful of those shrimp. But we enjoyed things.
What was your profession, and how did you choose it?
It didn't choose it really. We just got married, and we decided that, well, my job then was cutting my wages at the service station I managed, and so I decided to go work in a mill with the idea we would work a year or so and then go back to college, thinking that we might be teachers or whatever. We didn't know, had no big thing planned. But your dad was born, and then your uncle was born a year later. And we started making car payments, and we just never got back to full time. So I spent 42 years working in plywood mills, but it worked all right. I got into management, and it was pretty enjoyable. But it was a good career.
If you could have had any other profession, what would it have been, and why wasn't it your first choice? You partly answered it, I think, but
yeah, in the back of my mind, what I always wanted to be was an archaeologist. I'd love to go dig up bones or whatever, pottery, whatever it was. That was always my secret desire, I guess. And I always read a lot about things like that.
Gotcha.
And basically stayed in plywood mills because it was a pretty good living, And then for a period of some years, it was hard times, and we had to keep working someplace.
Yeah. Of all the things you learned from your parents, which do you feel was the most valuable?
Love and patience from my mother.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My dad was just too mixed up in his own life to understand much. He just had too much troubles. Your dad's got some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we worried about him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe he's doing good now. I hope.
I hope so too. What accomplishments were you the most proud of for yourself or family?
In Sealed Temple with your grandmother.
There you go. And last question, what is the one thing you most want people to remember about you?
I don't know. I'm not a prideful person. I just remember I loved them. I want things to go good. I don't wish harm on anybody. I like to see success and what people do. I'm very proud of my sons and my grandsons and granddaughters. I'm a happy person.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.